you're going to wait for motivation, it's going to let you down. What happens if 6 months pass or 12 months pass? We're still in the same place. And people might say, oh, I'm going to feel the same way, but reality is they won't, they'll feel worse.
How do you stop quitting when your motivation has left the building?
Coach Gav has got the answer.
Can either quit or keep going. They both can suck. You're not motivated to go to work every day, but you still show up. You're not motivated to be a parent every day, but you still have to show up. But then when it comes to like losing weight or staying fit, it's like, oh, I need to be motivated.
People say, oh, it's not about motivation, it's about discipline. That's true, but most people listening to this are like, how do I build discipline?
I'm not a disciplined person. There's a false belief that you either are or are not disciplined.
Discipline is like a muscle, like you build it through reps. For me, it's like doing the thing you say you're going to do. Doing that is going to build trust with yourself.
Very much shifts from like, I can't do this to like, oh wow, I can do this and I can show up. It does start to change your belief.
How do you start when you're just not feeling it?
The first step is always...
Hi, I'm Jaymie.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is the Body Smart Podcast.
And we are women's weight loss experts on a mission to help you feel permanently in control of your health and your weight. And one of the main struggles that we actually hear from our clients on this topic is motivation. Because you might want to get healthy, but we know that actually doing the healthy things is really hard. So we have actually got one of our head coaches with us, Gav, today, who is the undisputed king of calm, collected, quiet discipline, which we're going to explain is actually the answer to your motivation struggles. So 70% of people who want to lose weight actually state that motivation is the biggest obstacle in their way. Gav, why do you think that is?
So I think when it comes to motivation, we spoke about it earlier, like when people are getting results, typically they don't have motivation issues. It's when maybe people's results slow down or stop, they start to struggle a little bit more with motivation. So I think often it kind of comes from, like in the beginning of your journey, when you start, your necessity to take action is so high. Like you need to do this. And it probably comes from like a pain that you've got. Like I need to do something about this. I'm not happy with the way I feel about this. And the pain point is super, super high, which brings like the necessity super high too. And I think in the beginning that will drive you forwards. But as you start feeling better, looking better, losing a little bit of weight, that pain point can drop pretty quickly. So as your pain point drops, your necessity can drop. And then people start to get a little bit complacent with their actions. So typically I think it's when results slow down or stop, the motivation becomes a little bit harder to keep going.
And I do think for a lot of people when they start, obviously there's a reason that's driven them to start. And that is that pain, that is the motivation. But as you said, it doesn't last forever because motivation isn't a state that is permanent.
Like a finite resource, isn't it? It does come and go, and we can feel more motivated just because we've had a good night's sleep. Right.
Yeah. Or there's a good song on.
Or it's sunny outside, especially in the UK.
Yeah. And actually something that's really interesting is motivation is an emotion. It's not like a thought process or a personality trait. It's like an emotion. Mm-hmm. So if you think, well, could I just be ecstatically happy all the time? No. Yeah. Could I be sad all the time? No. You can't be motivated all the time either. Mm-hmm. And it's actually comes from the more kind of prehistoric part of your brain as well. So it's not even something you can really control. If we think about stuff like you have rational thinking that you control, you have lots of things that you grow up and learn to self-regulate. Motivation is in that category of things like anger, fear, that it just does its thing and you're not in control of it. And I think that's why it is the biggest struggle, because people think, well, if I just learn how to get motivated, then that'll be the answer. When actually it's not a thing you can learn to do.
Yeah, I guess it's almost like an incorrect belief that we should be motivated to take actions with our health and wellness all the time. Like I always use the analogy, like you're not motivated to go to work every day, but you still show up. You're not motivated to be a parent every day, but you still have to show up. So there's like, but then when it does seem when people come to like losing weight or staying fit, it's like, oh, I need to be motivated to take action.
And it's almost the opposite. It's actually like you need to take action to get motivated. You're going to get motivated off a result rather than just being motivated one day. Like typically you're going to take action, feel good about that action, and then it's going to drive your motivation up a little bit. There's a great quote, and it's like, motivation is doing something when you feel like doing it, and being disciplined is doing it regardless of how you feel. And it's a bit like that. If you're going to wait for motivation or rely on motivation, there's going to be times it's going to like let you down for sure.
I actually just think take it out of the equation.
Yeah.
Like I don't even try and be motivated. It's not even in the discussion for me because it's not there more than it is there.
Exactly.
Which I think is reassuring to hear, because that is the case for a lot of people. But then when you do your workout, so you have a good day of staying on top of your diet or being healthy, you do feel better for it. And then motivation can come from being in motion. But yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Like when you get up in the morning, you don't go, I don't really feel like going to work today. You're just like,
or you might think that, but you just do it anyway.
But you just do it anyway, and it's almost like trying to apply that same mindset towards your health. But a lot of people, I guess, just view it as like there is a choice, and there is, of course, but it's the cost of that choice and the inaction.
Yeah, but it can be useful because it is often the thing that gets people to start. So it might be the thing that makes somebody like go and look up a workout program or find a coach or like just commit to making a change. So it can be useful, but it's important to know that it is useful for that like kickstart, and then you've got to shift into something else. You can't expect that motivation to continue all the way through and carry you.
I derive like motivation a lot of the time, sometimes from like pain or how I don't want to feel. So like I know if I don't work out for like a couple of days, like my mind gets really negative and I'll feel more anxious and I've got lower energy. So even though I might not want to be motivated in that moment, I can like future think like, oh, I don't want that version of Jay, so I'm just going to go and work out now. Because like that's this like an hour of this sucking, which the first 30 minutes probably sucks, and when you get into it and you feel fine, is much better than the version in a couple of days. So I try to use that, and I see it with like clients as well. Like we're talking about like necessity being the reason they start and change. They're just using that pain as a driver to take action. But I think you can derive motivation from lots of different places.
And that kind of like simple frame of just asking yourself, like, what would the person I want to become like do in this moment right now? Because they would probably just get up and do it regardless of how they feel. They're not just going to wait on that motivation. So like you said, sort of thinking about how you'll feel after it, thinking about how you'll feel in the future if you don't do it, can be like a really good sort of motivator as well. Because it's good to talk about the positive things you're going to achieve when you get there and like all the, you know, the paradise, but also reminding yourself like about the pain if you don't. So what happens if you don't do this? Like what happens if 6 months pass or 12 months pass? We're still in the same place. And people might say, oh, I'm going to feel the same way. But reality is they won't. They'll feel worse. It's like you hold a weight for 5 minutes. It's light. And you hold the same weight for 5 hours. It gets heavy. And it's a bit like that. The emotion of just feeling the same way plus time, it gets worse. So I think just having that driver of like, I know what I want to achieve and like who I'm going to be and what I'm going to feel like when I get there. But I also know like what is the cost of this if I don't do it? Like if in 12 months I haven't done anything about this, how am I going to feel? Like what kind of impact is this going to have on the people around me? And sometimes like that painful thought process will be the one that actually sort of forces you to take action.
Yeah, I think that's that James Clear quote, isn't it, from Atomic Habits, which is like, we do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And it's, you know, a lot of people can have like the goals of like, oh, I want to lose 50 pounds, or I want to, like, we can have the same goals, but who's successful and who isn't, it's going to come down to the systems that they have in place or the habits that allow them to get to that goal.
I think as well, everything that we're talking about is shifting out of that emotion-driven action and into very rational thinking, like even sitting down and consciously thinking, what is my goal? I want to lose 50 pounds. Why? How do I want to feel? How do I not want to feel? That is bringing a very rational approach to what started as like quite an emotional motivation to make a change. And I think it doesn't really matter what your motivation is. So like for me at the moment, it was interesting when you said that about like it being a negative driver for a lot of people, because I would usually say for me it's not, but at the moment definitely is, because I am pregnant and having a baby in January, and last time I couldn't train through my pregnancy and I lost so much strength and just felt like really weak and vulnerable, and I hated like having lost so much muscle, that is what's driving me. That's my motivation. Now you could say, oh, my motivation is to be as strong as possible, but it's not. My motivation is to not be as physically like weak and vulnerable as I felt before. And that's so much more tangible to like drive me to get up and do a workout when I don't want to, because I can really feel that pain. So I think as much as we want to promote positive thinking, being able to balance both and use that rational discussion in your brain to see both, you can then tap into what you need at different times.
Definitely.
So sometimes, and that's what coach is great for, right? Because the coach can gauge, do you need a positive or a bit of a push today? And then like remind you of the thing.
Yeah. And I think that's something we'll tap into a lot with clients, like what they want to achieve and, you know, where they want to be, how they want to feel, but also like getting quite clear on the cost of not doing it. And that's something that I think if you can get clear of like, does the cost of like taking action outweigh the cost of staying the same, is a good sort of way to think about it. And, you know, for some people, the cost of staying the same is like they get sick, they get unhealthy, they get low in energy. And the cost of taking action is I probably have to do some more exercise. I probably have to think about my nutrition. So there's costs to both, but it really ultimately comes down to like, which is more of a cost for you.
Yeah. So have you got some like go-to exercises or conversations that you have with clients to really harness this motivation and give them like very clear path forward to use it to their advantage?
So yeah, I think with like motivation, like we know not to rely on motivation, and people say like, oh, it's not about motivation, it's about discipline, and that's true. But most people listening to this are like, how do I build discipline? Because it's like, it's okay to say it's not motivation, it's discipline. So I think ultimately discipline, if you become a disciplined person, you don't need to rely on motivation. So it's like, how do I become a little bit more disciplined? And for me, it's like doing the thing you say you're going to do. And I know that seems simple, but doing that is going to build trust with yourself. Like the more you kind of follow through with what you said you were going to do, the more you're going to build trust with yourself to be that person that's like, I follow through with the thing I say I'm going to do. Like if you think about it on the flip side, it's really easy to like break trust with yourself. Like say in the morning, you say you're going to the gym and then you get up and you want to lie in a little bit and you're maybe like, oh, I'm going to do the gym tonight. And ultimately you've still done the same action. Like you still got the gym in, but you didn't do what you said you were going to do. You just kind of, you change the plan. And what that does, I think, is like creates almost like a normalized behavior of just like, I'll say I'll do something, but I don't actually always follow through with it. And that's where you can sort of break trust with yourself of like, I'm not someone who does what I said I'm going to do. And this can be as small as like, you know, I get up in the morning, I make my bed as soon as I get out of my bed. And it's like, I've won the first battle of the day and I did what I said I was going to do. And over time, you'll start to see that the more you do that, the more you're just going to trust yourself. So that's a big one. And I think that also comes into like setting realistic targets, like things you know you can actually follow through with. And then over time, like discipline is like a muscle, like you build it through reps, like you're going to get more discipline through time. And if you don't lose it, you're probably going to lose it. So over time, just slowly, like setting yourself goals, following through with them, and you'll start to feel like you're becoming a bit more disciplined.
And it is huge, that, isn't it? Like I would say that's probably the thing the women that we've coached in the beginning that they've struggled with the most is that they've not been able to keep the promises to themselves with their health and wellness for so long that they've completely lost trust that can Body Smart or can another thing actually get me the results I want. And that's why I think it is amazing, like over like a 4 to 6 week period, we do a lot of the things that you've just said. We set a realistic plan, they take action, they're held accountable, they start seeing those results. And it very much shifts from like, I can't do this to like, oh wow, I've got 6 weeks of evidence saying I can do this and I can show up. And it does start to change your beliefs around what you can do. Right. But on discipline, I do think, because it's a weird word, isn't it? Like a lot of people think of discipline, you think like, oh, getting disciplined in school or by your parents. And it is just like having good habits and showing up and keeping your promises to yourself. But I kind of look at it as well sometimes, though, as like, you can actually, so like I heard Chris Williamson talk about, you'll get somebody that'll go on a Stairmaster, and I've done this. I've 45 minutes on a Stairmaster. Like, you know, you sweat out and you're like, oh, I'm so disciplined. Yeah. And we get someone else who goes and plays squash or paddle or, you know, a racket sport for an hour. And they're like high five and having a great time, smile, socializing. They probably burnt more calories playing the sport and was like, oh, that was just a fun activity with my mate. And then the other one felt like 45 minutes of like grit and discipline. So I think there is a way sometimes where you can actually set your healthy lifestyle up in a way that's actually enjoyable.
You don't, it doesn't have to feel like discipline that you were saying of like punishment. I also think there's like a false belief that you either are or are not disciplined. Like, I'm not a disciplined person is something that I was definitely guilty of saying to myself in the past, and to a point probably still do. I'm not what I would consider a disciplined person. I would never do that to myself, ever. You'd have to pay me quite a lot of money. Go on the Stairmaster for 45 minutes.
I just put a YouTube video on and feel like I'm just learning for 45 minutes. You know,
but the point is that the evidence in my life shows that actually I am quite disciplined. And that's enough, you know, evidence to my brain to keep being disciplined. But I think it doesn't really matter what we label it. It is what you were saying, Gav, of doing the things that you say you're going to do, or doing the things that you know you need to do. Because that's what discipline is, really, isn't it? It's like, if say you're in the army, you don't say, oh, I'm going to get up and do the things. You just know you just got to do them. Yeah. You just do them. And I think for a lot of people that have managed to get their health and fitness down, that's what it comes down to. It's like, I'm not even consciously telling myself I need to do this. I get up and I do the thing, and that's just my life.
Yeah. And I think like if you can get into that mindset where it's, you really understand why you're doing something, like the real reason, and you remind yourself of that all the time, you're going to be in more of a place where it's like, I need to do this. You know, it's not a question. It's like, I'm just going to do this because I know I have to. Like, I know the outcome of doing this, and I know what happens if I don't do it. Yeah. And it becomes more of just like, I don't have a choice. Like, I have to do this. And that's where you kind of want to be with your goals, where it's like that important to you, that, and you're that clear on it, that nothing's going to get in the way, and that, you know, you don't need to worry about discipline or motivation. You just know that I need to do this. I need to figure out a way of making this happen. So yeah, I think like a lot of it will come down to, you know, setting yourself goals, getting really clear on that goal, like why it's important to you, and reminding yourself of that all the time. And
also, to tie back to what you just said though, the actions are actually going to get you there, because I think that's really powerful. Often people start on a health journey or a weight loss journey, and they just pluck an idea off the internet and go, right, I'm going to follow this plan because that says that I can lose 10 pounds. They don't really understand the mechanism behind how that's going to make them lose 10 pounds, but they're just like, right, if I just do this, it will work. And so the motivation to keep doing it when it doesn't quite work is very low. Whereas if you really understand, right, these are the specific actions I'm going to take each day, and I know how each individual one is going to lead me to my goal, there's a lot less internal battle of like, oh, should I bother putting the effort in because it isn't really working? Like, if the science says this is going to work, and I do it properly, it's going to work.
But I think that's it. Like what you were just saying, Gav, though, is like people don't care if the science says or this says. They just care if they're seeing the results themselves. Like it's, you know, how many clients have we said, oh yeah, you can eat pizza and lose weight? And then it's like, no, you can't. And then they like factor in a pizza one weekend and lose weight, and they're like, huh. And then, you know, so like the penny drops for them because it's happened. Even though we can say, oh, it's calories in versus calories out, and you can eat these foods and lose weight. I think you have to go through it yourself and have that evidence. And I think that can be a big low for people with motivation, is like when they're doing the things that they're expected to do to see results, but not seeing the results. It's like, well, I'm doing all the things, I'm doing my steps, I'm getting my workouts in, I'm eating healthy food, but I'm not losing weight. That's when motivation is like tested at its all time sort of low, isn't it? Because it's like, I'm doing all the things, but not seeing the result.
For sure. Like, I think that I understand that. Like, I would be frustrated if I'm like, I'm following the steps and I'm not getting the outcome I wanted. And I think that's something we do with our clients really well, is just set out like a really clear game plan. So, you know, on that first call, like we'll have a chat with them and understand what they want to achieve, but we'll also map it out for them from start to finish. Like we can pretty much predict, if you do X, you'll reach your goal at this point, and this is exactly how we're going to do it. So the client really understands that, like Stacey said earlier, like every single action you take is a step towards your goals. And if you think about it that way, it's like, is this choice going to take me one step closer to my goals or one step further away? Like, it's typically most choices are not going to be in the middle. They're going to be either one or the other. And if you're asking yourself that, again, you'll sort of catch yourself in the moment and make better decisions. But definitely having sort of direction to know that, like, okay, this is my goal or where I want to get to, but this is how I'm going to get there, and this is the steps I need to take. And it all, like, understanding the why behind the what will definitely make it a lot easier for sure.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will listen to that and think, how can you possibly know when I'm going to reach my goal? But it really is that mathematical.
Yeah.
If people were robots and had robotic lives that didn't change, or menstrual cycles or whatever, if we could be as controlled as we would love to be and just follow the exact process, we would get the exact outcome. And I think that's what people don't necessarily believe, because they've followed processes before and they haven't got the outcome. But it's because we are not robots, and it's because we don't have the exact discipline, or whatever you want to call it, to do it perfect every day. And that's fine. But to know, like, actually, if I did, this is what I could expect, is really powerful. And I think then when you do see a few days of, this is actually what Gav said was going to happen, what? Then you buy into it a bit more. And then that's what you were saying, with you can believe it because you're starting to see it happen. And then the motivation is stoked, because it's like, maybe if I do it for 3 more days, then I'll get what he said will happen after 6 days.
Yeah.
And it, like, snowballs.
Exactly. And you're right, like, some things we can't predict. You know, like, we can predict the rate of weight loss and effort and how that sort of ties in. We can't predict life completely changing all of a sudden and a big obstacle getting in the way. But we also know that, like, if a client is committed, we will find a way around that obstacle. So no matter what comes up, there is always a way around it with your coach. And if you're committed, like, we'll still be able to get you to that outcome. So yeah, like, it is pretty much a case of, like, helping a client understand, you know, what they want to achieve, why they want to achieve it, and how they're going to achieve it. Yeah. And that's how they'll connect the dots, I think.
But that's a really having a growth mindset, isn't it? It's going, like, right, no matter what situation or you know, I'm facing, or what obstacle, I'm going to look at this and be like, right, how can I best navigate this? Like, what are the solutions that I can put in place? And when you address obstacles like that, I just think you can't not win. No. Like, you can only move towards your goal. And sometimes moving towards your goal actually might be like, say you've got a weight loss goal, like, plateauing for a week or two, because you go like, hey, my job's just turned upside down. I've got to fly to the other side of the country. Yeah. I've got to do this. I've got this. It's like, okay, maybe, like, aggressive weight loss right now is not going to be the best. We're just going to try and maintain, stay active through this point, and then get going again. And it's having that mindset, because the default for a lot of people is just like, this is too busy now, I can't do this. But I just always think anytime those big obstacles or challenges happen, if you learn to navigate through them, like, when it goes back to normal, it's easy. and then when the obstacles come up again, you're like, oh, I've dealt with this before. Yeah. So it just makes it, like, building more evidence to say that you can continually show up.
The other thing that I think is really helpful with those kind of periods in life is it still proves the process. Because if you say, well, I'm going to tone down my training, I'm going to tone down my deficit, and I know if I eat this much and train this much, I can expect this outcome, and that happens, even though it's maintaining, you're like, oh yeah, the process is still valid, it does still work. So when I go back to it, it will work again. I'm just going to tweak the dials again. And we often say, actually, clients who have to handle these challenges, they do better.
Definitely.
And I think, actually, you can believe in a system more when you've seen it in every option that it can possibly exist. If you've only ever seen it in full steam ahead weight loss mode,
it's almost a red flag, isn't it, with clients? If you see someone and they come in and they just nail it for 4 months straight and have had no obstacles, you're like, oh, shit.
Worst feeling ever, yeah. We have a client, starts in January, they do 8 months, they get to their goal, you get them to graduation, and then you're like, we've not done Christmas, we've not done holidays, and you're like, how are they going to... So yeah, like, I think, you know, with coaching, like, having a year, 18 months to actually experience everything you're going to experience can be super helpful. But with weight loss, it is the obstacles that will slow you down. You know, if there's no, obstacles or barriers in the way, it would be a lot simple. So it's usually the obstacles and the barriers that we do need to work around. And, like, kind of like you were touching on, Jay, is there's always a way. There's always a way to get around it. And if you kind of put yourself in a position of, like, maybe a mindset of, I don't have a choice but to follow through with this action, how do I make it work? Like, how would I do this if I didn't have a choice? Like, say my life depended on it, how would I make it happen? And it might seem a bit extreme, you know, if my life depended on it, but ultimately, like, a lot of the time it is that, you know, their health, the way they feel. Our clients, like that emotional baggage for another 10, 15 years, like it is going to affect the quality of life. So sometimes just putting yourself in a frame of like, I have to do this. How do I make it happen? Rather than just focusing on the challenge.
Yeah, like burn the bridges mentality. Like there is no going back. You know, there is no, because I mean, ultimately you're on a diet till the day we die. Yeah. So you're either on a diet you used to be on, which wasn't serving your health and wellness outcomes, or you're on this new way of living, which does. And it's like, how's it go? It's you can either quit or keep going. They both can suck either way, but you know, one of them is going to take you 20 steps backwards, isn't it? So it's tough, but the obstacles are just like anything else in life, are just massive learning curves and you know, obstacles to overcome. Like in business, in work, in your career, like everybody's hit them in other places. Just with people's health, it just gets thrown out the window.
It's kind of where the growth happens, like the challenges, isn't it? Like where you come up against a challenge, you make it through the other side of it. And that's what we do with our clients. It's not like just tell them how to get around the obstacle. It's like, let's work together and find a way to get around this so that you know in the future how to get around this. You know, you're being solutions based, you're focusing on let's think about the solution rather than challenge. And that ultimately will help clients become their own coach in the future, where they don't need somebody to, you know, be beside them, giving them that guidance. But, you know, instead of just sort of telling clients what to do, we do want to help them come to their own sort of conclusions and work it out for themselves. You know, long term, that will always serve them better.
I think that's really different to what people expect from a coach, because often when we get clients starting with us, they think, right, I need help with motivation, so I'm going to get a coach and they'll motivate me. That's not really what we do, is it?
No. No. To a point, we'll be there to help and, you know, build them up and keep them moving forward. But I think it's more, we help clients, say motivate themselves, but we help clients understand why they're doing this, why it's important, so that they almost motivate themselves. And they, instead of us having to be there to keep them motivated, we help them just get super clear on, you know, why it is important for them. And then that's when they'll become sort of more disciplined.
And I think one of the other things is we teach them those more rational ways of breaking down a problem, like you said, being solutions focused, finding discipline, finding patience, resilience. So these are all tools in their toolbox then that they can fall back on, and you don't need somebody else to give that to you. Like once you are resilient, no one else can make you resilient. You have to do that work. And I think that's maybe a bit of a misconception. People think, well, I'll get a coach and effectively they're the answer. But actually, you are your own answer.
Yeah, we can't do it for you at the end of the day. Like we can do almost everything apart from that. Like we'll set you up and we'll, you know, keep you accountable. We'll, you know, set up a plan that's going to work. But ultimately, like we can't do the action for you. That is the one part we can't do. Like if we could, we probably would. But ultimately that bit comes from the client. And
we literally would.
Yeah,
if we weren't online. I remember when I was an in-person PT, I had a client that lived like a couple of streets from me, and one morning she didn't turn up. So I was like, right.
Go into her house.
I went to her house and I threw stones at her window.
I had a client.
Alexa, get out of bed.
I had a client, a Body Smart client, and she struggled to drink 2 litres of water, and it was kind of like, I can't drink it for you. And eventually I just ordered a 2 litre bottle of water on like a 2 litre water bottle on Amazon and just sent it to her. And I'm like, that's like as close as I can get to drinking this water for you. Please use this bottle. And we would, but it's ultimately it has to come from yourself. But that's our job, to help you understand the plan, the direction we're going in, and also the meaning behind it, you know, and keeping that top of mind, because that can fade. Like, you know, as I said, when you start making progress, your why isn't always as strong. You know, it can be.
Did you know we have an award-winning one-on-one coaching program designed especially for women aged over 30 who want to lose between 15 and 60 pounds? Just like this podcast, our Body Smart method cuts through all the BS out there and brings together the latest weight loss science to fast-track your weight loss. Find out just how we can guarantee we can help you lose 15 to 60 pounds in the next 6 months at bodysmartfitness.com.
Can we get into that a bit, because we've used why, like the why, the how, and everything else. Obviously, the why in the beginning, as we've mentioned, is often very pain driven. It's like, I no longer want to feel like this. I'm 50 pounds overweight. I want to see results. I'm unfit. You have like a high desire and necessity to change. But then as we get in, that why does change. So how do you, because like sometimes the pain isn't there. You feel better, you look better, you've got more energy, you feel, you know, like you see in progression. So how do you continue to keep that why top of mind with clients?
I think a lot of it is having them tap into ultimately like, how is this going to change your life? You know, when you get there, like what's going to be different? You know, what's going to feel different? How are you going to show up? How are the people around about you going to benefit from this? So there's lots of different ways you can kind of drive up your why, like your meaningful reason. But I think it's important to tap into it often, you know, reminding yourself why you're doing it. And I think, to be honest, like the further along the journey you get, the more you probably have to tap into like the almost a loss aversion of like, you know, what if I don't keep going? You know, what happens if I go back to square one? Because you've been there before and you know what that feels like. So I think it, like you said before, a balance of like, you know, all the great things it's gonna, you know, that you're gonna achieve when you get there, but also what happens if you don't? Like, what happens if we don't do this and we go backwards? So I think tapping into it often and making sure it's really sort of clear, and sometimes you have to sort of redefine that, because what you wanted in the beginning you might be closer to, you might have already achieved that. So why is it now important for you to keep going? Like, what's the next goal to be working towards?
And I also think as you achieve certain goals or milestones, a lot of the time our clients' horizons broaden. So what they thought was a possible goal or like change, they're then like, I've already done that. So what actually is possible? And so their goal changes, but their why changes as well. And it maybe becomes a lot deeper because they realize they can affect so much more than just like the physical.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning, like it's always when you ask a client what their driver is behind making this change, it's typically quite surface level, and you have to kind of dig a little bit deeper to really understand like why it's important. You'll have sort of intrinsic motivators, you also have like extrinsic motivators, and tapping into like both of them will be super important. So
can you just explain both of those?
So yeah, like intrinsic motivators is probably more of a like personally this is going to impact me, it's going to make me feel good. Extrinsically is more like an external factor, I would say. So intrinsic could be like, I want to feel good on the beach in my bikini this summer. Extrinsically could be like, if, you know, I need to do that, or my health markers are going to get worse over time, or I need to do this because I want to be fit to play around with my kids. Like, I don't want to be struggling. So tapping into like both of them can be important, because sometimes like one won't be enough. Like sometimes on those days where you're like, oh, I want to feel good on that beach in the summer, like that's just not enough. And you need to tap into like, okay, who else is this going to benefit? Like, what else is this going to benefit in the future? So
seen a really, me and Steph were at the gym together before we went away, and there was like these three girls on the treadmill, and one of them was like screaming at them like, you don't want to be fat on those wedding pictures, bitch, like that. And I was just like, oh wow. I was like, I was just laughing. Like they were all going for it as well, like these three girls. And that, I think that's like a something that you typically do see weddings, holidays. Like there's a real extrinsic motivator to get there. But I think that's like you see it with challenges too. People get to that point and then it's just like straight off a cliff edge.
Oh, it's so all or nothing. Isn't it?
Because you've got this massive external driver that is like pain or shame or just whatever's driven to get you there. But then it's such the peak of the mountain. It's like as soon as you get there, the only way is down. Yeah. And if you don't have those like intrinsic reasons, like you said, because you can use it, you can be like, oh, I've got a wedding coming up. I'll use that as a helpful motivator, but also I'm doing this because I actually want to be fit and healthy and look after myself. It's a good balance of the two.
I think the examples you gave as well, Gav, were really good, because I think sometimes the intrinsic is held on this pedestal of like everyone should have an intrinsic motivator and extrinsic are a bit shallow, or you should do it for you shouldn't do it for your husband, you shouldn't do it for your kids. The reality is most of our clients are people pleasers. Yeah. So I'm sorry, but it is going to be powerful to do it for their family, their loved ones, their dog. Like, I don't even care. But if that is something that is important to them, finding a way to tap into that is powerful.
And sometimes like the reason you start something isn't always the reason you keep going. Like when I started training and sort of exercise, it wasn't for the same reason as I do it now. It was probably more like vanity and you're young, you want to look good. Now, like, I don't care so much about how I look, but I just know I show up as a better person when I'm exercising and looking after myself. So I know that I feel better. So intrinsically, I have better energy. I'm more productive. I'm got better focus. Like, I just feel better. But I also know that, like, I'm showing up as a much better version of me for, like, my team, my fiance, like, these people around me, because I'm looking after myself. So, and now that's my driver. Like, that's why, like, I don't have a choice. I'm like, if I don't do this, I'm not showing up as a great person. So that's my sort of motivator. And it's okay to, like, start because you want to feel better, but tap into, like, how else is this benefiting you? Like, what other things are, you know, improving in your life? What other, you know, is it your relationships? Is it your energy? Are you sleeping better? And these will be reasons as well to keep going.
I'd be good to know what you guys, how you both personally feel about this. So I talk sometimes about, like, having that, like, inner bitch, which is, like, that voice sometimes of, like, don't do it or don't take action. And as much as it can get loud sometimes, it, like, really does win. And I think if maybe somebody's listening, it can sound like, God, this sounds like a lot of effort and a lot of choices. But actually, and we do see this with our graduates, and it's the same for yourself, once you actually just become skilled enough in the things that you need to know around nutrition and training properly and self-awareness, you know, just managing your health, and you have certain systems in place, like you get the type of food that you buy and everything else, and then you've shown up and worked out for years, like, it doesn't feel like there's effort involved, of course, and sometimes you don't want to do it, but because you've just shown up for so many years, like, you're just used to, like, oh, I don't feel like it today, but I just go anyway. Like, it doesn't feel like it's...
We still have a little chat. We had a little chat this morning. Bitch.
Yeah. But that version of you has shown up that many times and had that chat that you just take action. So I just mean, like, it does get easier the longer you do it.
And you get more skillful at handling her. Because this morning, I was just saying to Gav and Si, I've started at a new gym, and the handles on the assisted pull-up machine are really fat. And my arms hurt in a place that I don't even think I have a muscle. Like, it hurts so much. Yeah. And so this morning I was like, I don't think I can go to the gym. That was the inner bitch. Yeah. And I was like, you have legs. I was like, okay, I'm more skillful because I know I can just train lower body and core. Whereas maybe if you're at the beginning of your journey, you're like, no, my program is like full body. Like, I can't do that.
And that voice is so convincing as well, especially in the beginning. Yeah. I mean, that's the same as you said in the morning when you get out, when you lie in bed and your alarm goes off, it's like, oh, I'm really tired. Like, should just have this extra hour. And sometimes, like, that is the difficult part. Is so sometimes you probably do need the extra hour, but I would say it's most of the time, it's a very good excuse and you're in a bitch is winning.
So it does come with time and practice, I think. And it's easy, it kind of feeds into that discipline and patience and resilience that we talked about earlier, that you have to put in the reps and you have to put in the months of actually having a coach to be that rational voice, to argue back to the inner bitch, so that you've got the answers then for the future, and then you can be more skillful of having those conversations and negotiating background to, like, what your rational self really wants.
The first step is always, like, the hardest, and, like, with all of our clients, the initial couple of weeks, that's when they're going to find it the hardest, because it's new. It's like new habits. They're thinking about new things they've not thought about. But then if you speak to a client that's maybe, you know, a graduate and they've been here for 18 months or 2 years, they probably don't think about these behaviors every single day now. It just becomes more of, that's their lifestyle, like, that's what they do. But it takes time to build. Like, you don't just wake up or be born disciplined, for sure. Like, you do have to, like, build that muscle over time. But yeah, I've got, like, that inner bitch too. And I think mine's probably a weird one, where it's like my inner bitch is just, like, not very logical sometimes. Like, I'm now just at a point where, like, I don't listen to my body. My mind is just like, get out of bed, because see, if you don't, you're going to feel so much worse about not doing it. So yeah, like, I think, you know, balance of listening to your mind and your body is good at times, but yeah, I've had that before.
Yeah, it's very much like what we're talking about there. Like, and I think it's a good frame, because people are like, oh yeah, you can build a habit in, like, 21 days or you know, whatever amount. But, like, what we're talking about, where you change the way you eat, the way you think, the way you address problems, you change who you are as a core, your identity. That takes time. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people get confused. Like, it should just, like, again, the shoulds, it should just happen in 3 months or 6 months. But if you think about, like, changing, like, fundamentally, like, who you are from being, like, where you are now to the really fit and healthy version of yourself, Like, of course, that's going to take time and reps and sets for that to really embed in, to be like, oh, when this problem happens, I don't act like this anymore. I behave like this, so I change, you know, and it's a very different way of viewing it, but it takes time and reps and sets. And I think thinking otherwise, like, doesn't respect, like, the difficulty of it. Because if it was just so easy, like, everyone would be in shape, everyone would have a six pack, everyone would be super fit. So of course it's going to take time, and like respecting that can like help you in that time where it's like, well, I've been doing this for 3 months, and then, like, why aren't I seeing more results? And it's like, patience.
Or why isn't it easy yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually want to come back to what you said of the first couple of weeks being the hardest. Sometimes I actually think the hardest is when somebody has got it down and then they stop being actively disciplined. Like they stop thinking, oh, I have to try at this because it's a habit now, so I don't have to worry about it, don't have to think about it, don't have to plan. That's actually when it then becomes harder, because you did have it all together, and then because you stopped maybe one little bit of planning, the dominoes will fall down. And you're like, what? This was all fine. I didn't even need motivation. Now I've suddenly got to find motivation again to pick it all up.
And yeah, like I think that's something we see with the clients we work with, or ladies, is, you know, when that does happen, the whole day just goes to shit. And it doesn't need to be like that. And one thing, like, we work with our clients is like, what does like a neutral day look like? So if you're having a day and it's not going to plan, like, it doesn't need to be like a 0% day. Like, can it just be a 50% day rather than a 0% day? I always think about it like a race. You saw that guy that ran across Africa. Like, see if he was doing that race.
I did not see this guy run across Africa. What?
No?
No.
You've not seen this guy, the hardest geezer?
I
I've
didn't know he
seen.
ran across Africa.
Yeah.
They ran. I'm pretty sure he ran right across that.
He stopped.
Oh no, yeah, he stopped. But it took him like a year.
Yeah, it took him a year.
Yeah, it took him something. He's got a YouTube channel and a
Yeah.
series. It's really good. But I always think about that, and so if you think about a race or going anywhere, if you're going like 2 steps forward and 1 step back the entire time, think how much longer, how much more effort, you know, that's going to require to actually get to where you want to get to. And something I like to teach my clients is, like, see on that third step, like, see when you're having like 2 good days and 1 bad day all the time, it's obviously slowing your progress down. But how about we look at it like, on that third day, can we learn how to just stand still? So it's like we have 2 good days and then we have a neutral day and we have another 2 good days. Think how much faster and with like how much less effort you're actually going to get to your goal. So that probably ties into a little bit of like all or nothing a little bit as well. But that's something we see a lot, and it's like, not every day is going to be perfect, and that's okay. But let's like just learn how to scale it up and down. So we know what like 100% days look like. We know what a 0% days looks like. And then we also know what we can do in between, so that, you know, something is always going to be better than nothing.
I think all or nothing mindset, or all or nothing thinking as well, is a massive motivation killer, because it really taps into those high motivation days. You go for it 100%, or you start a challenge, or you start your health kick and you buy all the healthy food, and that is your all go mentality. And then it runs out, and the only alternative you know is 0. Yeah. And I think that's why motivation feels so strong and so much of an obstacle for so many people, because they associate the motivation element with being really great, but there's nothing when that goes. Literally nothing.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, we don't ever expect our clients to be perfect, you know, because it doesn't really help. You know, as soon as you start being perfect, it's kind of hard to maintain that. But yeah, I think that'll be something that slows a lot of people down, is bad days, like days that aren't going particularly well, and you know, there's always something you can do to turn it around. Like, this next choice you have, can you make a slightly better decision and make it a day that's, you know, a neutral day, that rather than sort of a bad day. So definitely like looking at what your maximums are and what your minimums are, and just knowing like, cool, I know what they are, and I know that life is going to change, and I might have to just scale up and down a little bit depending on what happens, but I'm never going to give nothing. Like, you can always give something, and it's going to be better than giving up a day.
This actually ties into one of the questions I was going to ask you, which is, how do you start a day when you're just not feeling it?
I think there's 2 things I would say. Is first one would be like trying to win the first battle of the day. So whatever it is, whether it's like getting up on that alarm, whether it's whatever it is you like as the first sort of battle of the day, try and win it. Like try and just get through that, because like I was saying earlier, that will start to build like positive momentum of like, I did the first thing I needed to do. What's the next thing? So try and win the first battle of the day. The other thing I would also do is lower the barrier for entry a little bit. So see on a day where you're not feeling like it and you know, like I need to get up this morning, I need to go and do an hour's workout, and you really aren't having a good start to the day or you're not feeling it, learn how to like scale it back a little bit and lower the barrier. So what I mean by that is from like a movement perspective, maybe you had an hour's workout in the gym. Instead of doing that, can you maybe just drive to the gym and do like a 10-minute walk outside? Or can you, instead of maybe doing like an hour's workout, can you do like a 20-minute workout? So instead of it always being like, you know, this is the goal, and if I don't achieve that goal, like, you know, I've not achieved the goal. Like, can we, you know, adjust it a little bit and show up for something rather than nothing again? So I think lower the barrier for entry. So if it's maybe a day where you don't think you're going to get that full workout done, what can you do? Like, how can we adjust this? What can we do?
And that feeds into your point earlier that action breeds motivation, because you're not waiting for the motivation to do the hour workout. You're doing something, and actually a lot of the time you start thinking, I'll just do 20 minutes. 18 minutes in, you're like,
totally.
This is all right. Maybe I could stay a bit longer. And the motivation finds
Absolutely.
its way to you.
I've tried as well recently, or like the last couple of years, I've just realised, because my inner bitch is the loudest first thing in the morning. It's like, I don't know if any of you guys like spring out of bed in the morning with a big smile on your face.
No.
No, okay. I'm glad it's not just me then. But you know, so like that version of me, I feel like the inner bitch it's kind of loudest, and it's like would try and convince me to do. So I always try my best to be as intentional the night before. So clothes are laid out, bags packed, I know I'm working out, I've put it in my calendar, alarm goes off and I feel tired and groggy, then I get a shower and then I have a glass of water and then I start working out, and it's like I've just removed the idea of it being a decision. It's like I decided the night before, and then everything just led to that behaviour. And like you said, you know, even if you are having a particularly tough day, you just go, I'll just do 15 minutes. And if I still feel off, hey, maybe that's a sign. Like today isn't a day I should push and do an hour's workout. But if you do 15 minutes, you often find the blood gets pumping, your heart gets going, you wake up a bit more, you're a bit more energized. I mean, like, oh, like I'm into it now. Let's keep going.
I think what you said about the night before is really key as well in mindset, not just in practical, like getting prepared. So going through your calendar for the next day and literally thinking about like, what do I need to do tomorrow? What are the things that might come up? Like if you get to bed late, knowing that you're probably going to wake up feeling a bit tired and preempting that little inner bitch conversation. I did actually do that last night. I was like, I'm a bit sore if I wake up like this tomorrow. I'm probably not going to want to go. And so I actually planned a leg workout in my head. And then in the morning, I was like, you can use your legs. But if I hadn't done that the night before, it would have been a lot easier because I was in a moment of weakness to just listen. To
the intentionality the night before I think is huge. Yeah, with lots of things, because it just, otherwise I think, because when you get up in the morning, if you're not, it just feels you just instantly fall into chaos. And the chaos is like all these decisions I've got to make, and kind of do this and kind of fit that in, and I haven't got time. And then it just doesn't.
Yes, that brings me on to something else. Have a template day of like when you don't have the capacity to make decisions or have these discussions in your head, just have like a copy paste day of like days I have no time, I eat this for breakfast, I eat this for lunch, I eat this for dinner. Yeah. I go for a walk at this time. Like, just do that. Yeah. Don't try and make it up on the spot, because that's when you negotiate with yourself and you negotiate down to zero. Yeah.
And then that it all comes back into like planning ahead, doesn't it? Where you're like thinking of what potentially could come up. And then you create like a little if this, then that scenario. So you're like, if I do feel this way, I'm just going to do this. And you're sort of planning for it in your head a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think all of this comes back to that rational thought and being like letting your rational brain be in charge of your life, not your emotional impulses. What I think is really interesting, though, is it all sounds very organised and it may be a bit boring. And people often write in like their reviews of their coaching experience and stuff, they're like, I really enjoyed it. I loved every part of my journey. And other people might be thinking, well, this sounds like pretty strict and disciplined. How do people enjoy it?
So I think it's like enjoying the process. I think it'll come into like reflecting on what you're doing, you know, reflecting on the wins you're having, like how life is changing, and really sort of being aware of it and noticing not just like the big wins like on the scale and you know, maybe with your dress sitting better, but you know, maybe just improved sleep or, you know, like improved energy and focusing on all these like little daily wins over time. Again, the wins will sort of build motivation. You know, that's what's, again, the more you're noticing change and seeing these results and these wins, it will keep you motivated longer.
And self-esteem, doesn't it? Like when you are doing all the things that you said you were going to do, and then you're feeling good, I mean, you're looking good, and you've got more energy, and you're cognitively sharp, and you've got more energy with your kids, and you're speaking to your partner more, and it's like, oh wow, it's like, where's this? I mean, so then you're like, oh, all these actions I've been taking are leading to me feeling this good. My self-esteem's through the roof, my confidence through the roof. It's like, like that's why those things are so enjoyable, because this version of me is so worth keeping.
That actually brings me nicely onto a trust pilot that I've got from one of your clients, Gav, which I thought it's a really nice thing to end on because it really captures what you just said. This is from Susan, who said, after having my first child, I struggled with losing weight and getting back into shape. Life just gets so much busier as a working mother that you don't even realise how fast time passes, and it feels impossible to allocate time for diets, meal prep, exercise. But after working for a few weeks with Gav, everything seems to be possible again. It's all about the mindset, finding ways to create the daily routines that will make a big difference on the long run. For the first time, I believe the impossible is possible. And I think that last line is exactly what all of this change does. Like, it's not about motivation. It's about building your life to be whatever you want it to be.
And I think that probably touches back into like why people enjoy the process, is like that belief, that confidence has just came back. They're like, I believe this is now possible. Like I can see myself achieving this. But yeah, I remember Susan. And Susan had like a very young child, like her husband. So she lived between Germany and America, and her husband worked away a lot. So yeah, like legend of a client, she did great, but that's a great example of someone that does have like loads of obstacles in the way, but she found a way to navigate around them. And now she's doing like CrossFit competitions and all sorts of different stuff. So that's probably stuff that on day one, if we'd said like, yeah, in like a couple of years' time, you're going to be taking part in CrossFit competitions, she would never have believed it. And that probably is, again, like redefining her why. Like her why now is probably nowhere near the same as what it was in the beginning. Her why now is like, I want to smash that CrossFit competition, and that's why I'm showing up.
Do you remember like what her why was in the beginning?
I remember Susan in the beginning, like she'd had her first child. She'd basically struggled with losing weight her whole life. The thing I just remember with Susan is like the confidence change over time. You know, I think with clients in the beginning, you'll know yourself, like you have that first call and sometimes they're a little bit nervous and they're maybe a little bit unsure. And then over time, as you start to see their confidence changing, and just like I said before, trusting themselves that they actually can do it and they can sort of, you know, follow through with the plan they'd set out initially.
So let's finish off with your 3 top tips to let go of motivation, what to do instead.
So I think instead of relying on motivation, the first thing I would do is just get super clear on why you're doing this, okay? And write down, you know, why is this important to you? You know, who's it going to benefit? And what happens if I don't do this? So get super clear on your why, and that's going to, you know, keep you motivated as well. Try to not rely on motivation all the time. So I know we spoke about it a lot, but try to maybe focus more on how do I build trust with myself? How do I build self-discipline over time? And then also with motivation, try and and willpower as well, try and preserve it. So you've only got so much of it. So like we touched on earlier, if there's things you can put in place that just make decisions like a little bit easier, that's going to preserve motivation, or it's going to preserve willpower for when you actually need it.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, hopefully that's been useful. If you've been listening, you've been struggling with motivation, you now know, let it go. And time to work on discipline and your structures and your habits and your resilience instead. Thanks for coming down, Gav.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers, Gav.
Thanks, guys.